Welcome back to the news today. This is the Daily Debate. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is in his second day of meetings with Congress today, talking to the Senate to ask for more time to negotiate a final deal with Iran. It's become a highly divisive issue in U.S. politics, with many lawmakers insisting they must have a say on the deal, while President Barack Obama has threatened to veto any bill limiting his freedom of action on the issue. It's all set to come to a high point with a vote as early as today from Congress on a bill that would let the legislative branch weigh in on the deal. And with me tonight to understand a little bit more about this is Sheldon Schorer from Democrats Abroad Israel. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. Before we will go to Ayman, I want to ask you, when the Republican, and we saw the midterm election, and we understood that the Republican are ruling the Senate and the Congress, we said, okay, he will have a lot of problems, Barack Obama will have a lot of problems in the domestic issues, but in the foreign issues, he will try to do everything that he can to dominate his vote and to dominate his saying. As is his right. And this is exactly what he's doing. Can they really tell him not to?
Well, look, this whole question has two faces on this, two different aspects. One is the political, the second is the legal. When you say, can he? We're asking a legal question. Does he have the right to do so under the Constitution? A second question is, should he, because of the political? Now, the political, let's do the political first. It's been 25 years that Congress has flexed its muscles and tried to take away powers from the president. We saw that it was very strong in 1994. Right, the midterm elections, the first midterm elections after President Clinton was elected president. First of all, the first 2 years they were very nasty to Clinton, starting with scandals, deep water, which turned out to be nothing, and many more. And they were yelling and screaming. And then finally, in 1994, the Republicans took over Congress and started to challenge. Newt Gingrich challenged the president for power. So until then, it was always, Democrat or Republican, you're the president, we support you. And this has been generally the Democrats have supported. That's the reason why, for example, George Bush Jr., when he said we have to go into Iraq, Democrats supported him. He's the president. He knows what's going on. But Republicans have a different agenda. They want to take the power, specifically the Congress. They want to take away the power, and that's what they're doing here. And if you would jump to the other part, do they have the right to? I think not, and I can explain why later.
So let's see what our viewers have to say about that. Ayman, you saw, and you're bringing us the answers.
Good evening, Lucy, and good evening to our guests in the studio. Well, with 47 U.S. senators recently penning a letter to Iran saying they would not uphold the deal made with President Barack Obama, the role of the House of Representatives in this deal has become hugely controversial. But how much of a say should Congress have? That's what we asked our viewers on Facebook and Twitter today. We asked them, should Congress have a say on a final deal with Iran? Let's take a look first at the results of our global poll. As you can see, Lucy, 94% voted yes, 4% voted no, so a strong opinion there. Now let's review some of the comments we received today. First up, Stella tells us the U.S. Congress is already fighting Obama on this. When dealing with a country like Iran, the president should be allowed to make a decision on his own. The Congress has proven that it aims to sabotage this deal. So we're kicking off with a strong point of view here, suggesting that there may be times when the president should act independently. That's not a popular view, though. Danielle replies to Stella. She says, Stella, that's not how the U.S. democracy works. The Congress is supposed to protect the nation's interest. Our president can't and shouldn't bypass the Congress. Next, we have Martha, who tells us it's a fictional story that Congress doesn't support the deal. There was only a collection of members who spoke against Obama. Eventually, the only thing they achieved is more sympathy for the president. And the president, as we know, Lucy, did criticize the senator's letter, and the international media also seemed to be critical of this move. But we saved the best for last. Edwin tells us, where does Obama stand? Where does the Congress stand? Is anyone asking, where does the American people stand on this deal? Both the president and Congress seem to have made the people irrelevant. And I'm sure, Lucy, if we look hard enough, we'll find the same sentiment on the Iranian side. Are the people's interests being forgotten in the political give and take? Back here in Israel recently, political analysts said after the elections that if we couldn't change our leadership, we should change the people. But before we go that far in the U.S., is it time to change the Congress? Sending it back to you and your guest, Lucy, for more.
Yes, it's a big question. Is it time to change the Congress? And joining us right now also to this conversation is Mitchell Barak, pollster and commentator and political analyst. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to I-24 News. Barak, I want to ask you, maybe it's time to change the Congress, like we're hearing from our viewers. Maybe the citizens are not being taken into consideration, and it's only political, you know.
And you change the Congress in what way?
And changing maybe the people, changing the way that they are thinking, because it seems that it's all political games. It's not.
Well, foreign policy is an interesting thing in Washington, because although it comes out of the executive branch, out of the White House, Congress is very much involved in it. And I'm not just talking about treaties. Every single ambassador that's appointed by the White House has to be approved by the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee, I believe, and then it goes on to the Senate floor. And you have the senators have to vote on ambassadors, just like in this country, in Israel, the government votes on it. So the Senate is involved in foreign policy. They're also involved in treaties and ratifying treaties and what the White House does. And especially in such a contentious situation like this is, where there is a divide and there are people that want to see it, Congress represents the people, and they should have an interesting right to see it.
The Congress represents the people, and they should take care of the will of the people. And we are seeing maybe, and we saw it also in the past, a president coming from one side, a Congress that is coming from another side, and the president just decides. He says, okay, this is what I want. I don't even care what you think, because you are, unlike what you said, the Congress should support, although they are not, because he's the president. But he is saying, you know what, you don't want to support me. I don't need you. But
well, let's clarify a few things. First of all, you said they don't take the interests of the people in heart. They take the interests of the people at heart because they want to get reelected. We don't live in a democracy. America is not a democracy. It's a republic. As a republic, the people who have been elected make the laws, and they have the right to make the laws based upon whatever criteria they want to do, which could reflect what their constituents do, and sometimes they take brave positions against their constituents, but they have that power. You don't ask the people except every 2 years or every 4 years. So you don't. That's number one. So that's the people's interests. People can try to influence the congressman. They can lobby for it. They can write letters, etc. But ultimately, it's the congressmen who make their decision.
And right now, the White House is taking out a statement that the president will be willing to sign this compromise bill after threatening. So, what is it? Are they going to take part in the decision or not?
Well, there's always something called the checks and balances in the United States. So where you have the executive branch, the legislative branch, there's a balance here of one branch checking the other, and it goes also with Congress and the executive. If Congress has writes a law in, the president can veto it. Then, of course, the Senate can override it. But there's a play here that's both political. There's internal politics, there's external politics, there's foreign policy here. But the system is geared so that there is some kind of check and balance, so that not any one unit can really do whatever they want, as you say. If he says,
the Constitution defines that. So it's specifically in the Constitution that Senate ambassadors get 2/3, must have 2/3 of the Senate approve it, and treaties need 2/3 of the Senate. Beyond that, it's the President of the United States has the exclusive power to make foreign policy. Where he's acting within his exclusive power, he doesn't need to speak to Congress. So in terms of the law, is he allowed to? The answer is yes, he's allowed to.
But he doesn't require. You asked me, can he or should he? Should he? Should he really maybe take all the, let's say, responsibility on choosing or deciding about something that big, and maybe in the future we'll say, hey, I was not the only one who took...
In this case, I think the president would have every justification for ignoring Congress, because one of the reasons not to ignore Congress, because you want to work together with Congress. You want a good legislation, you want a good government, etc. This Congress, this Republican-led Congress, has shown gross disrespect to the president, even to the point where 47 Republican senators started their own independent channels to negotiate this thing by sending a letter to Iran. This is absolutely unconscionable.
Exactly about this, because we are talking.
Well, I would say I agree with what he says, that I don't know if they're sending a letter to a foreign government that the United States and
they're
certainly
saying we don't
the
agree
Congress
with the president.
and warning them not to do an agreement with the president. I don't know if that's the most diplomatic thing that the Congress could have done, and I don't know if that was the wisest thing that they could have done. Maybe they should have started with a letter to the president. I don't know. But there is room for both involving Congress. And, George Bush was president for 8 years, and in 2002 he signed a deal with President Putin to limit nuclear arsenals between the United States and Russia and to cut back almost 2/3 of the nuclear arsenals. And in the beginning he said he would not bring it to Congress. In the end he did, and he asked for them to ratify it, as did the Duma was supposed to do that as well. So there is an involvement in that, and he might have had every right, but there are legal scholars on both ends. I'm not a legal scholar, but there are people that are saying now that he can't do it. There are people that are saying he are doing it. There's a lot of lawyers in America.
I can clarify this. There are 3 types of international agreements recognized in the United States. One is called treaties. Another are executive agreements. Another are executive congressional agreements. Now, of the treaties, the Congress, the Constitution only requires congressional approval for treaties. What are treaties? A treaty, without going into it, it's an international agreement which has a long-term effect, which is the supreme law of the land. Therefore, it has effect not only on the federal government, but also within the states. Of the 16,000 international agreements that have been made in the last half of the 20th century, only 6% are treaties. The rest were made by either the president alone or by president together with Congress.
Where were the sanctions? Where were the sanctions? The sanctions were who initiated the sanctions?
The sanctions, I think the sanctions came by through congressional action.
So you're telling me that the president can override a congressional sanction?
Repealing.
I don't know that we're going to settle this today.
Repealing. No, excuse me. Repealing is something else. Jimmy Carter unilaterally repealed the ABM treaty. Unilaterally repealed the ABM treaty, and they went to the Supreme Court, and he was allowed to do it.
I want to just. Iran is a big issue for everyone. It's a big issue for the Republicans. It's a big issue for the Democrats. It's a big issue for Israel, and God knows that it's a big issue for the Arab world. On such a big issue, let me play what if. What if I was the president of the United States right now? I would like to share the responsibility of the decision. So in 10 years, or in 1 year, or if Iran, God forbids, won't, won't stand in the deal or abide by the deal, I would like to say I was not the only one who signed this paper. You were signing this paper with me as well.
This is covering your backside and trying in case there's a problem. That's I think not a brave way of dealing with this thing. The President of the United States has exclusive power to make foreign policy, and as such, he is allowed to make executive agreements with foreign countries, and without the consent of the Congress. Whether he should or he shouldn't, whether you want to involve it in something else, but he's allowed to.
When you were talking about brave, this is not the exact word to describe Barack Obama, because he was more cautious than brave with taking this decision.
I think he's showing strong leadership, and in his fight with the Congress and his struggle with the Congress is showing the forcefulness of his leadership.
First of all, he's in the twilight of his presidency. So someone who's in the twilight of his presidency might take bigger risks and might not have that incentive to make sure that it's a sticking agreement, because, as he said in the interview, I'm not going to be around when the Iranians, would achieve nuclear.
Yes.
Right. The other thing is that since the announcement, there's no agreement inked. And the ramifications of this so-called maybe agreement has already caused Russia to sell missiles to the Iranians. Now,
do you really think that this is
can't
what
be
caused Russia
Well,
to
I can only take Putin at his word.
It was an already sold deal.
It was a sold deal, but they had delayed it for a period of time while these negotiations were going on and while the U.S. was putting pressure
So
on.
he's an opportunist who wants to make some money. So
That's great, but when Israel, which is America's greatest ally, meaning I would think that I would think that U.S. congressmen and senators would be concerned that new Russian missiles might be pointed at the Israeli population. I would think that would be a concern of theirs, because already there's no agreement. They haven't even decided on anything, and Congress has not even seen any real document. And already the shift in military might in the region is changing thanks to Russia.
By the way, these are defensive missiles, not offensive missiles. It's
We will talk
anti-aircraft.
exactly in 2.5 minutes about that specifically on our one-on-one. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much for being with me in the last 60 minutes. And we're going out for a small break, really small break, 2 minutes. And then we will continue discussing only with one person about the S-300. What is it? Don't go anywhere.